Alright, this is the second video of the graphing calculator exercise for analysis 2 using a TI-83 we talked about in the previous video how to graph this function y equals x squared cosine x natural log of x, how to zoom in on different parts of the graph, change window settings, and even showed how to get a maximum. Well, now we're going to see how do you find minimums, maximums, and zeros, how do you store values, and that'll allow us to solve questions 1 and 2. You can see the answers to all the questions down there, but that's what our goal is right now. So we left off and we were able to create a graph that looked something like this. Now for that first question, I asked you to find all the local minimums, maximums, and zeros, and in particular I wanted you to store the x values of the minimums and maximums. Okay, so let's just first of all show you how you could even find these things. All right, everything's up here in this calc. Second, if you the trace button, you do second and calc, and it'll get you all of the different options. This ends up being a very important tool for you, really, all throughout your math courses. Being able, particular zeros, minimums, and maximums are really important. So, well, let's, I guess we'll go in order. First, let me start with finding a zero. All right? If I press enter, okay, if I press enter, I will, you'll see it says left bound. Now let's say we wanted to find this zero. Zeros are the x-intercepts, so we're looking for really the x values where we cross the x-axis. Alright, so you see you know, this blinking cursor thing, it's saying left bound. We want to go to the left of it. Alright, so there's actually two ways you could do it. One way you could use the arrows, and I'll do that now, and maybe when we find a minimum or maximum I'll show you how you could just really just plop a number for x. So I go to make my cursor go to the left of the zero, and I press enter. You'll see a triangle go. That's kind of the left bound of, you know, it's pretty much saying that our zero is somewhere to the right of that triangle. So now I bring my cursor to the right, that little blinking object there, and I will press enter again, and now it's hard to see because of course it's right on the line, but we have another triangle which is telling us that our zero is trapped in between those two triangles. So the last thing says guess. If you only have one zero like we have in this case, the guess won't really matter. This is more important if there were maybe multiple zeros and you want to tell the calculator kind of which one are you looking at, but whatever, I'll just put it close to the that zero anyway, and I press enter, and if you see, it tells you the zero. So we know that this zero is around 4.712389. Alright, so that's how you'd find a zero. Really, minimums and maximums we're finding in very similar ways. Alright, so if I go to second and calc, let me find this minimum that we find here over to the left. So if I click the minimum, once again I have left bound. Now I can move my cursor to the left of this local minimum like I did before, but also if you notice, you could see you know, our scale, our x scale is at 1, so all these tick marks are 1 apart. Well, you could see at 3, we're to the left of this local minimum. So if you actually just press 3, if for, you know, it's asking question left bound, if you press 3, it's going to say x equals 3. You press enter, and bam, it puts that triangle right at 3. I know that if I press 5 for my right bound, x equals 5 would put me right around there. I press enter, and bam, you can see the triangles right there. So that's kind of a quicker way than having to move this thing all the way around. The guess, once again, we only have one local minimum there. So, I mean, you can take a guess. Okay, it looks like it's around 4. So you could say 4 and enter. But it probably wouldn't even matter that much because there's only one local minimum there. And you could see, it gives you that point. It gives you the x and the y values there. Okay? Now, the other thing, the maximum. Once again, a lot of the same stuff, but with the maximum, I'm also going to show you how you could store the values. So just so you know, I'll show you in the calculator window after we do the maximum, but right now, if I go to the calculator window, if I pressed X in the calculator window and equals, it would spit out this number. As a matter of fact, I could also go to a menu item and find the Y we're working with, and it would spit out that value on the calculator screen. So really what we're going to end up doing is storing the value to another letter that we use, and I'll show that with the maximum, okay? So second, calc, the pattern's the same as a 0 and a minimum. I go to maximum. That means the calculator knows I'm looking for a maximum within two different bounds. So left bound, I could see this is, I'm going to go to 6 actually. I know if I go to 6, I'm to the left of that local maximum. And if I click 8, I'll be to the right of that local maximum for the right bound. Then the guess, you know what, there's only one local maximum there. I'll just press enter, saves time. It shouldn't confuse the calculator. And you could see it gives you the maximum coordinates, and that's giving you this point right up there, right at the top there. Now let me show you how we could store this value, and that's you know, understand me storing this value. You could do that with your zeros, with your minimums. You could do this with everything. So the calculator, once again, the last thing we found on our graph is what the calculator is going to have stored. So x is going to be 6.65, you know, 6.64, 66227. Remember that number. And then the y, because our graph was at y1, if you actually go back to the graph, well, it went there, but that maximum will be stored in the y1. So just to show you how that works. So if I go to second quit, I go back to the calculator screen. Okay, you could see I already did the work previously, but I'll show you again. If I press X and enter, if you remember that number, that's 6.646622665. It even gives more accuracy here. It has that X stored. If you wanted the Y, if you wanted it, you could find it in this string of button pressing. Vars for variables, it's right there if you look at my thumb. Y vars, you press enter at function, and it has all these things, y1, y2, y3, you know, all those. Well, our function was stored in y1, so if I press y1 and now I press equals, you get that 78 value. That was the y coordinate of our maximum. So, you know, it's just a way you could get those values. Now, the problem with leaving x as x is that next time I find a new minimum, maximum, or 0, it'll take over that value for x. So if I want to save this value of x so that I can answer the second problem, I need to store it. Alright, and this is a very valuable tool when you have a longer math problem with some kind of long decimal approximations, and you want as accurate an answer as possible. Well, you should store values in your calculator. Alright, so if I press X, down here it says stow with an arrow. I'm going to press that, okay, and that gives me my little arrow. Now I already stored, there was another, in the first video we saw where we could find the maximum all the way to the left. Then there was another minimum and maximum. So I already stored the other maximum and minimum. Just to show you how I could store this one, I'm going to store it in C. Okay, so if I press alpha C, it's now saying x, the value of x is going to be stored at C. Okay, so I press enter and that number pops up again, and now if I press alpha C and enter, I get 6.64 yada yada. It gives me that entire thing. Now, like I said, there was another maximum and another minimum to be found. If you look at the first video, we found the first maximum. This video, we found the minimum and the maximum. And I already stored those under A, B, and C. So the last question, so the first question, hopefully you could see how you could figure out all those answers. But the second question, I wanted the sum of the squares of the x-coordinates of all your maximums and minimums, rounded to 6 decimal places, by using your calculator store function. Well, there were 2 local maximums, 1 local minimum. I did already store them. So it's just I do alpha A, was where I stored the first one earlier in the video, not in the video, but before I started recording. I press squared plus alpha B, click squared, plus alpha C. That's the one that you saw me storing, and trust that I did A and B in the same exact way, squared. And when I press equals, that would give me my answer to that question, number 2. Alright, so in the last video, we're going to discuss question 3, where I asked you to solve an equation using the intersection function and the 0 function. So that's coming up in the next video.